What if your pain wasn't just pain? What if that chronic discomfort, that loop of self-doubt, or that emotional weight you've been carrying for years wasn't a punishment, or even a random trauma, but a message? We live in a world that constantly tells us to let go, move on, raise your vibration, as if healing were a checklist and enlightenment a finish line. But deep down, most people don't feel lighter. They feel stuck. And that's not because they're broken. It's because they're missing the actual point. See, most suffering doesn't come from the event itself. It comes from the invisible belief underneath it. The belief that says, you're not ready. You deserve this. Pain is your teacher, and you're a slow learner. And here's the twist. These beliefs aren't even conscious. They're old agreements, energetic contracts signed in childhood or even before this lifetime. You didn't consciously choose them, but you've been living as if they're law. Now, here's something no one tells you on those pretty Instagram quotes. You can't manifest your way out of a belief you secretly think is true. You can try the affirmations, you can light all the sage in the world, but if some part of you still thinks that suffering is necessary, it will stay. Not because the universe is cruel, but because it's faithful. It mirrors you, especially the parts you try to hide. So what happens when you stop fighting the symptom and start decoding the symbol? That's what this journey is about. Not escaping the pain, but understanding its architecture. Not rejecting the loop, but realizing how to walk through it, eyes wide open, with your higher self as your guide. Because once you understand how reality reflects your beliefs, the game changes. You stop begging for signs and start speaking the language of symbols. You stop reacting and begin remembering that you were never disconnected. You just forgot how to listen. And if you're wondering why things seem to repeat in your life, the same emotional wounds, the same self-sabotage, the same almost breakthroughs, it's not bad luck. It's a loop, waiting to be made conscious. So, let's begin where it always begins. With what you believe, deep down, about yourself, about life, and about what you think you're here to endure. Because the moment you shift what you believe, reality will follow. Let's talk about how. Most people believe their pain is circumstantial, caused by a breakup, an accident, a betrayal, or a long series of bad luck. But what if the pain isn't just a result, but a signal? One that's pointing to a deep, invisible belief that's been shaping your entire life from behind the scenes. You see, we don't attract what we want. We attract what we believe. And beliefs aren't just thoughts we think, and they're frequencies we live. If there's even one part of you that believes you must struggle to prove your worth, or that joy must be earned through suffering, your reality will keep bringing you lessons to match that script. What makes this so tricky is that these beliefs often don't feel like beliefs at all. They feel like facts, like gravity, like the way life simply is. Someone who grew up being praised only when they achieved will unconsciously believe that rest equals failure. Someone who felt abandoned may believe that love always leaves, and they'll subconsciously recreate that pattern again and again until they finally see it. So the real question is not, how do I get rid of this pain? But what belief is this pain protecting? Because all suffering guards a doorway, and behind that door is a truth you forgot, and a version of you that already knows. And when you start to become curious, not judgmental, about your patterns, a new energy arises, one that isn't rooted in force or resistance but in awakening. Most people say they believe in healing, in abundance, in spiritual growth. But belief still contains doubt. Knowing is different. Knowing is quiet, embodied, immovable. You don't have to convince yourself of what you know. It becomes part of your natural response to life. Imagine standing on a cliff and someone tells you to jump, promising there's a net. If you merely believe, you'll hesitate, you'll question, you'll stay stuck at the edge cycling through scenarios. But if you know, you jump, not because you're fearless, but because you trust reality in a way that changes your relationship with it. This is the same energy that heals. It's why some people suddenly release physical pain, because they stop trying to believe they're worthy and start knowing they are. That shift doesn't come from mental gymnastics. It comes from integration, from making conscious the parts of yourself that still feel separate. To get there, you don't need to fake positivity or pretend everything is okay. You need honesty, radical, loving honesty. Ask yourself, what do I still think is true about me that's no longer serving who I'm becoming? Knowing isn't loud. It doesn't need to shout affirmations in the mirror. It moves quietly, like roots underground. But it changes the entire landscape above. There's a unique kind of shame that only spiritual people feel. It's the shame of not being better by now, of still getting triggered, of still doubting, of still hurting after all the books read, the meditations done, and the shadow work journaled in candlelight. This shame is subtle but poisonous. It whispers things like, "You should have healed this already," or, "If you were really spiritual, this wouldn't affect you anymore." And ironically, it's this shame, not the pain itself, that keeps the loop alive. Pain doesn't need punishment. It needs presence. It needs permission to be understood. When you resist your current state in the name of some idealized version of healing, you separate from yourself again, under the disguise of growth. Here's the truth. Your higher self is never disappointed in you. It's not measuring your progress. It's witnessing your process with infinite compassion, and sometimes it lets discomfort stay a little longer, not as a punishment, but as a mirror, until you recognize what you've been avoiding. Real growth isn't linear. Sometimes it spirals. Sometimes it feels like regression. But often that feeling is simply the part of you that's finally safe enough to emerge, because you're strong enough now to hold it. Ever feel like you're reliving the same situation in different disguises? A different relationship, but the same betrayal. A new job, but the same self-doubt. It's not coincidence. It's a loop, a reflection of an unresolved belief, running in the background of your life. These loops aren't malicious, they're sacred. They repeat not to punish, but to offer mastery. Life gives you the same test until you remember you're not a student anymore. You're the teacher. And the loop ends not when life changes, but when your response does. When you stop reacting from the same wound and start responding from your truth. That's when the pattern dissolves, because it no longer serves its purpose. One powerful practice is to pause and write out the last 3 times you felt that emotional pain. What triggered it? What did you believe in that moment? If there's a common thread, that's your loop. Noticing it is the first act of liberation. The loop loses power the moment you stop judging it and start understanding it. Not everything needs to be broken. Some things simply need to be seen. You don't need psychedelics, retreats in the Andes, or 10-day silent meditations to experience altered states. You've already touched them, in dreams, in déjà vu, in those moments of awe where time bends and reality softens. But because no one taught you how to honor those states, you dismissed them. You labeled them weird, coincidental, or just a mood. You didn't know that those moments were reminders, gentle taps from your higher self saying, "You're more than just this body and story." States of consciousness are like radio stations. Your default setting might be the static of anxiety or survival, but there are other frequencies, ones where inspiration flows, synchronicities increase, and guidance feels near. And the more often you visit them, the easier they are to return. To the key isn't chasing the high. It's learning to anchor the memory of the state. Just like muscle memory, consciousness has patterns too. You can recreate that expanded awareness through breath, stillness, movement, or even sound. Not to escape this world, but to see it more clearly, because those states aren't otherworldly. They're the real you, when you stop trying so hard to be someone else. We're quick to see triggers and pain as mirrors, but what about the moments of magic? The stranger who offers exactly the words you needed, the song that plays right when you ask for a sign, the dream that answers a question you didn't know how to ask. These aren't just nice coincidences. They're reflections of your inner alignment. They're proof that your consciousness is speaking, not in words, but in symbols. And the more you learn to interpret those symbols, the more empowered you become. The key is this: reality isn't literal, it's symbolic, like a living dream. And every object, interaction, or emotion can carry meaning, if you have the eyes to see. For example, feeling seen by someone might be a reflection of the part of you that's finally willing to be visible. Losing an opportunity may symbolize the death of a version of yourself you've outgrown. These aren't just external events, they're internal metaphors. You don't need to overanalyze everything. Just be curious. Ask, what might this represent? When life becomes a conversation, not a performance, even ordinary moments shimmer with meaning. There's a strange pressure in spiritual communities to create your reality at all costs, as if any deviation from bliss means you've failed the test. But this obsession with control, with perfect manifestation, often masks a deeper wound: fear of uncertainty. Control is seductive. It gives the illusion of safety. But life isn't a machine. It's a mystery. And mysteries don't unfold by force. They reveal themselves when trust is present. Surrender isn't giving up. It's aligning. It's saying, I'll walk forward, even if I can't see the whole path. It's making space for the unknown to show its face, not as chaos, but as choreography you couldn't plan. Here's something practical. When things fall apart, ask, what's trying to emerge, instead of, what did I do wrong? One question binds you to guilt, the other opens you to grace. The paradox is, the more you release control, the more life begins to reflect your essence. Because finally, it's not your fear driving the ship, it's your soul. You've never been disconnected from your higher self. You've just been distracted. Many people imagine their higher self as something distant, floating in the ether, available only during deep meditation or moments of crisis. But it's not somewhere else, it's you, without the noise, without the fear, without the conditioning. Every time you feel peace for no reason, every time you act with integrity when no one is watching, every time you know something before you think it, that's your higher self moving through you. You don't have to channel it. You have to remember it. You have to clear the clutter, the voices that say you're not enough, the expectations that aren't yours, the masks you wear to feel safe. Want to connect more deeply? Start with presence. Presence is the only language your higher self speaks. You won't find it in the past or in imagined futures. It lives in the space between breaths, in the now, where intuition becomes action and soul becomes form. And once you recognize that your higher self is already here, the way you move through life changes completely. For most people, abundance is a number, a bank balance, a perfectly aligned spreadsheet of income and expenses. But real abundance doesn't live in digits. It lives in flow, in the invisible dance between giving and receiving, between trust and timing. True abundance means having what you need when you need it to become who you're meant to be. Sometimes that's money, but sometimes it's a message, a delay, a breakdown that becomes a breakthrough. When you obsess over one form of abundance like money, you might miss the others, like the person placed in your path at the right moment, or the intuitive pull that saved you time. or the quiet nudge that changed everything. Abundance shows up in strange ways when you're present enough to receive it. And ironically, the more you chase it, the more it hides. Because real abundance doesn't respond to desperation. It responds to resonance. If you want more flow, ask yourself this: where am I still operating from lack? That awareness alone begins to shift everything. Because the source of abundance was never outside. It was always your alignment with the natural generosity of life. Some of the deepest awakenings come through what we try the hardest to avoid: loss, grief, heartbreak, illness. These moments crack the identity open. They dissolve the masks. They strip away the illusion of control, not to harm us, but to initiate us. Pain is not always a punishment. Sometimes it's a threshold, a rite of passage that says, you can't keep living the way you were. And instead of asking, why is this happening to me? The more powerful question becomes, what is this trying to awaken in me? Initiation doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for presence. It asks you to walk through the fire with your eyes open, even if your knees shake. Because pain, when embraced consciously, becomes clarity. What breaks you open can also birth you forward, but only if you allow it to. Only if you stop trying to get back to how things were and start moving toward what they're becoming. There's nothing romantic about suffering, but there is something sacred about someone who turns pain into wisdom, who alchemizes the wound into a window, who chooses to see the trauma not as the end, but as the door. If reality is a mirror and symbols are its language, then you are both the question and the answer, the wound and the remedy, the loop and the key. You don't need to be fixed. You need to be remembered, not as a fragile human trying to be spiritual, but as a soul who chose this exact experience to awaken something ancient, something luminous, something real. So when the pain comes again, and it might, meet it with eyes that no longer flinch, with breath that knows how to stay, with the knowing that this too is sacred, not because it's easy, but because it's part of the code you came here to decode, because maybe, just maybe, you weren't meant to escape the loop. You were meant to become its master, and that journey begins within. If this message spoke to something deep within you, then I invite you to keep exploring. There's always more to uncover and more to remember. You'll find other videos here on Mystic Atlas that dive even deeper into the hidden truths, ancient wisdom, and mystical forces shaping your journey. Trust that what you're meant to hear will find you exactly when you need it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for walking this path of remembrance.